Hi everyone, welcome back to Social and Media Matters Talks. Today I'm pleased and very delighted that we have with us Dawn Hawkins, who serves as the CEO of the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, an organization which is at the forefront of exposing the interconnectedness of sexual exploitation, including sex trafficking, prostitution, pornography, and child sexual abuse with the focus on mobilizing action and driving solutions, innovative solutions. Dawn is committed to creating a world which is free from sexual violence, where every individual can live with freedom and dignity. Dawn, thank you so much for making time for us. And I'm very glad and pleased that our viewers of Social Media Matters Talks, everybody here in India who watches these episodes, would get to hear your perspective and some insights from the great work that you've been doing. Thank you.
Well, thanks for all you do. I've learned a lot from some of these also. So thanks for hosting them.
Great. While doing my homework and while reading up more about your work, I came across that there's a group of more than 300 organizations, a sort of a global coalition that you've been working with. So my first question, and that is great and amazing and superb work. 300 is a big number. So my question is that, you've led this global coalition of organizations, which is primarily raising awareness of connections between different forms of sexual exploitation. Now, what were the key challenges that you faced, in uniting these very diverse stakeholders, and how did you deal with them?
It's tough in some ways, but I'll tell you, we've stayed very focused. Our coalition is trying to bring together anyone who is against all sexual abuse and exploitation, or from an organizational standpoint. If you want, the goal really is to bring together those who agree that we want to end sexual abuse and exploitation. And that's all we focus on. So when other issues come into play that are not connected or really are peripheral issues, political issues, we just say this is not the place to talk about them. So, in the United States, we've had like really tumultuous elections, really huge issues that are in other areas, and there will sometimes be a comment in a meeting or at our summits, and we just shut it down and we remind people, look, we are all coming from different backgrounds and different political perspectives, different religious beliefs, and so we need to stay focused on what we can agree on, and that's this. And so that's key, and reminding people about it all the time is helpful. And some have not been able to, some feel very passionate about other issues, and they believe that it's really connected to sexual exploitation and abuse, and they unfortunately just haven't been able to continue working super closely then with everyone else if they take that position. So I will tell you, one of the other hard things is we're against all sexual abuse and exploitation. For example, pornography. We think pornography in its entirety is bad, and it's none of it's good ever. And I could go into all the reasons why. Or prostitution, for example, is harmful to those who are being exploited. And you can't, we take up really strong positions on some of these issues. And so to be like formally in our coalition, you take those same positions. But we work with tons of other people on specific issues. So like maybe another organization is against image-based sexual abuse, non-consensually recorded or shared sexually explicit content, but they're not against all pornography. So we work closely with them on trying to address image-based sexual abuse, or IPSA, but maybe they're just not in our coalition. So we just try to be understanding.
No, I understand. And I'm sure the conversation at this point of contradictions where, as somebody who's leading it, I'm sure there have been times which have been tougher for you to bring everybody on the same page. But I guess the cause that we're all working for, and the intent is what matters in the end. So but again, incredibly great work to handle and match and every voice and bring everybody on the same page to work together. Now that brings me to the next question, Dawn, which is about the new revolution, AI. And I want to ask that with that rapid evolution of digital platforms, technologies like AI, and then deepfakes, what specific risks do you see emerging in the fight against sexual exploitation?
Oh, there's quite a few. I think I can bubble it down to a few categories. And these are more than risks because they're already happening right now. So, number one is the creation of kind of deep fake or AI generated or like forged pornography or child sexual abuse images, taking a real person and creating sexually explicit abuse material of them without their consent and sharing that. That's huge, huge, huge. And these tools that are now on the market are able to do it so quickly. Thousands of images really in just like that in moments can be created, and they look so realistic. And so these are being used to extort youth, to shame and bully countless individuals, to get them canceled in culture. I was speaking with one woman who's a journalist in a Muslim country, and some people didn't like what she was writing about and the things she was bringing to light. And so they created AI generated pornography of her, and she was fired from her position as at the newspaper where she was working at. And they did that to shut her up, right? So we're already seeing this happen at rapid scale. There's these nudifying apps, for example, that have emerged. We know of about 125 of them, and they were largely in the Apple App Store and in Google Play Store, and they were rated for age 4 and up for kids, like the youngest kids. So even if you turned on the parental controls on the devices, your youngest kids could still get these nudifying apps. And what would happen is you just take a quick picture of your classmate, upload it, and then it creates AI generated pornography of them. And this in the US, where we've been tracking it mostly, there's like thousands of these instances suddenly. We did get Apple and Google to kick them out, but like this, without thinking about solutions at a holistic level, like we're talking about everyone is a victim. You can't protect yourself. If your photo is out there, this could happen to you. If someone's walking by you and snaps a picture, it could happen to you. So the prevention, historically, when it comes to sexual exploitation, we've had some tools in our tool belt to try to help teach our kids and teach vulnerable people how to avoid having it happen to them. But with AI, there's really almost no preventative measures you can take if someone decides they're going to create this of you. So that's one of the massive problems. Another is that I see on the horizon is you might have like one bad actor, like one exploiter or abuser, but now because of the AI tools, they can just mass scale implement harm. So whereas maybe they could, like, especially online, whereas maybe they could spend time grooming and interacting with like 10 people online, 10 children online. Now they can use an AI bot to talk with hundreds at once, And so now like the scale is just exploding at way swifter speeds than you could even imagine. And it's already here. It's not like what we imagine is going to happen. It's happening right now. And so as long as all of these big tech platforms, social media companies like Instagram or Discord or TikTok, or, as long as they continue to not have policies to protect people online, to protect child safety, the lack of those policies combined with the rapid scale of these AI chatbots is going to unleash like unimagined harm on unimagined numbers of people.
Absolutely. You've mentioned some, points which are very hard hitting, like the ease of access to these apps, the kind of, as you mentioned, that these are available on app stores and Play Store, marked for age groups 4 plus. So anybody, so this access, ease of creating, and absolutely lack of resources and platforms to talk more about the complications and the implications of having creating deep fakes is something very disturbing. I mean, in India, we recently have had a case where in one of the schools, a deep fake of a little girl was being created and circulated, and and then the media took it up and things happened after that. But yeah, that's what the lack of awareness, the more knowledge sharing from the responsible agencies is what is lacking. And I really hope that everybody soon realizes where this is heading to and takes stringent actions. Coming to policy now, Don, you've always advocated for change of policies to combat exploitation. I want to know that what strategies have been the most effective for you in pushing for these changes, and how do you maintain this momentum in big tech advocacy?
Number one, let me explain to why policy is so important. I think we generally think we can solve this problem by teaching kids how to be safe online or giving parents more talking points how to engage and talk about these things with their kids. But those things are going to they're making very little difference in reality. And why are those things making very little difference? It's because tech has created these platforms completely irrespective of safety at all, especially when it comes, in particular, when it comes to sexual exploitation and abuse. And so, as long as these platforms are designed with just all of these flaws, as long as privacy and safety is like at the back burner, it's on the low on the list of priorities for these companies, like nothing we do to really try to help our kids and and vulnerable people is going to make much difference. So the way I see it is we need like mandatory change. So I try to go to companies directly and try to move them to change, and that's something we've had some significant success on. But honestly, I get frustrated because going to one company and then you have to go to the next, it takes so long. Like and then a new company like TikTok came on. We got all these victories with Snapchat and with Instagram, and then suddenly TikTok was on the scene, like and they were reliving all the same mistakes initially. So if we pass policy that creates minimum standards, that will, we hope, have like much bigger impact. So, but what's been the most successful? The most successful at both the corporate and the legislation has been when survivors come with us, when their voices are what is centered and elevated first. So, we're not the ones who get them to change. It's the survivors that come with us to the meetings. It's the survivors who speak at these briefings. And if it's not the survivor itself, it's their families. It's so many people who have been harmed. And as we elevate their experiences and stories, and they're the ones demanding what the solution should be, that's where we're seeing victories. And I think that's where the momentum has come from the last couple of years. Earlier this year in January, the US Senate called 5 of the big tech CEOs before them, and really critically, we were there and we helped bring a lot of parents whose children died by suicide after being extorted for nude images on these platforms. And this was huge. In like Mark Zuckerberg had to stand up and he turned around and he faced all these parents who had pictures of their kids. Oh, it's like such a powerful moment. And he apologized to them, which was like the most forced, insincere apology I've ever heard. But nevertheless, that's what changed everything. That's what got all these senators to care so much. And legislation that we've been fighting for in Congress for 25 years, like solutions for tech accountability, finally passed the Senate. And now it's before the House. But I think it's the voices of those who are harmed.
No, absolutely. Till the time we don't include the survivor perspective, I think we're missing out on a very big insight on actually what is being needed on the ground. Don, you've been emphasizing a lot on intersectionality of different forms of sexual exploitation. Now, if you could help me and share any example of how tackling one form of exploitation, for example, say pornography, that has helped address other issues as well.
Well, it's important to understand you can't really separate these things. They're all connected. And even more so now in our online environment, like these different harms have largely merged. So just like a couple of examples that are helpful. If child's on child sexual abuse has exploded, children acting out on other children and causing sexual harm. Why has that exploded so suddenly to like high numbers across the world? And it's largely because these kids are exposed to pornography and they're acting out what they view in pornography on each other. So that's one thing. If we want to solve child on child sexual abuse, we need to address early exposure to pornography. Or another is, violence against women, sexual violence against women in particular. If we want to address that, it's way more than just teaching consent, which where I am is what is usually talked about as the solution. Just teach consent and we'll end violence against women. No, as long as young men are watching pornography from age 6, 7 years old with extreme violence against women, and now our girls are watching it too, they're expecting that kind of behavior, we're not going to solve violence against women. Or another example would be prostitution and sex trafficking. A lot of people are up in arms and they want to end sex trafficking, but the reality is that all sex trafficking happens in the prostitution marketplace. There's this idea that women and children and vulnerable people are for sale, that sex, they can be bought and sold, and that sex is a commodity. And as long as there's demand to purchase sex, there's always going to be sex trafficking. We're not going to solve that problem. And so you can't really separate sex trafficking from prostitution. And then you can go down the whole rabbit hole of, but like almost everyone who's prostituted was trafficked and they've got all this trauma and exploitation. And maybe now they're choosing to be prostituting. But does that undo that they're trafficked and all the trauma that came from it? Or what about, like, you can't make prostitution safe. And if you legalize prostitution somewhere, you're just going to drive the demand for it. In all places where prostitution has become legal or decriminalized, sex trafficking explodes because suddenly people think even more that you can just buy someone for sex. So they flock to that area, and in order to keep up with the demand, more victims are pushing it. So I think as you start learning more about these issues, the intersectionality is so clear. And if your goal is to end these harms, then you can't separate them. If your goal is to just kind of try to mitigate some harms or to just try to deal with the harms, well, then you could do that. But my goal is to try to end violence against women and sexual exploitation. And so in that way, you can't really, I don't know if I answered your question fully. I think you had a second part, but I could talk about this forever.
No, no, completely. And I agree with you that if we want to end it, we have to deep dive, look into this, and the intersectionality part and perspective of it is something that everybody, all the experts and leaders, activists who are working on it, they need to look at this intersectionality to address it completely and holistically. Otherwise, as you mentioned, like we can also work on the issue at the surface level, but that isn't helping, and in the long run, if we see. So completely
Yeah.
with you on that point. I also read about this, and I want to ask that in your view, how effective has the public health approach been in framing pornography and sexual exploitation as societal harms? And what more can be done to raise awareness, particularly among the younger generations who are growing up in a highly digital world now?
Well, I think, if you step back and look at the research on these different exploitation issues, and in some spaces the research is not strong because it's really hard to research some of this sometimes. But there's there at least on the pornography issue, there's reams of research about the societal harms, about the harms to the individual, the user, the person depicted, and to attitudes. It does demonstrate that there's numerous public health harms. And I think as we elevate the research, as we help people understand, people can make more informed decisions themselves about if they want to partake in that. It's similar to like tobacco. Like, are you going to smoke? Well, here's all the harms. Here's what it does to your body. And here's what you can expect in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years if you're going to smoke. And then you can make that decision. And I think that's what we need to do as a society is elevate and help people make informed decisions. Do they want to sell themselves for sex? Do they want to have these intimate moments recorded and uploaded for anybody? And if they could understand the impacts of that, they can make more informed decisions. So that's one of the goals I have, is to just try to help elevate the realities so that we can make informed decisions. What more can be done? I mean, there's always more research that's helpful, but we need kind of governing bodies. Like here in the US, we've got the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, that really is seen, or like Health and Human Services, that's really seen as like the authority on what is healthy and not healthy. And the CDC here has made statements about the public health harms of pornography. The Surgeon General of the United States recently put out a statement about the mental health impacts of social media and how harmful it is to our youth. Those kinds of statements from high up people in government levels at at something like the United Nations, makes a massive difference in helping people understand these realities. So we need more of that.
Correct, correct. No, I agree. It brings me to my last question to you, Don. And the National Center on Sexual Exploitation organization, it operates on a global scale. How do you collaborate with international governments and organizations, especially in regions where these cultural or political contexts around sexual exploitation may differ significantly from those in the US? And I'm also counting India, because as I mentioned earlier, that the cultural nuances in India are very different, and it functions and plays out very differently. So how do you work with those?
That's such a good question. And well, I try to listen. We try to listen and understand what we can about the cultural differences. And it's not for us to, judge or make decisions for them. It's really important that we just share what we know. And then our hope is that those local can make more informed decisions for what's best for their communities. And so here's what we know. Here's what we know pornography's impacts are on youth. Here's what we know social media's impacts are on youth who are getting access at age 9, 10, 11 years old. And then let you're like locally, the governments and community leaders make those. So that's one. The second kind of way we do it is we work with those on the ground. Like we're really active right now in South Africa. And there's a bunch of things happening there, but working with the groups on the ground who know the political system, know the culture, and we just try to help them. If we can provide the infrastructure, the graphic design, the website, that kind of thing, that's our role, because we don't know what's best for the people of South Africa.
Oh no, great. So that gives me another point of discussion to speak with you, very soon again, whenever
Follow up.
you have time, and see, how social media matters and your organization, we can work together, because I really think that'll be wonderful. That brings us to the end of the conversation, Don. But this was amazing, and few points that have stayed with me is one about about your thought process and the approach of working with the coalition of different stakeholders, that stay focused on the issue, do not digress, stay focused on the issue. Everybody's the perspective might be different, but if the intent is right, then we can come together and work together. And also about the your perspective on the intersectionality of the issue, because I think that's a very deep dive, and that is what is required at the moment, because the kind of surge and the how do I say, the variety of cyber crime and the illicit cyber activities that we are seeing today, with the evolution of AI, the coming in of deep fakes, we really need to see and focus and work on the intersectionality part of it. So few things have really stayed with me, and I really look forward to another conversation of ours, because
Yeah.
I really believe that there's so much more that we need to learn from your perspective and insights. But thank you for making time for this one, and have a good day there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.